Welcome back. All right, so rounding out the previews for your Wednesday, we're going to round it out with the Vancouver Canucks. And this takes me to the halfway mark. 16 teams done, 16 teams yet to go. For the Vancouver Canucks, this was a tremendously rough season that I want to say enjoyed, but did they? 2022-2023, they ended up 38, 37, and 7. They were 22nd overall. Of course, when they brought in Tocchet, their record got better. The record got better also because they had weaker opponents, but Canuck fans were plenty frustrated that in a year where Bedard was the prize, the Canucks had to rally late. It's not the first time that's happened where the Canucks have rallied late to hurt their draft position. It feels like it's part of their go-to. So they get the slow start, right? Or they have a mediocre run and they're kind of close, and then the East Coast swing happens and they drop right off. And it just feels like that's predictable. And you look at their record against the East last year, it's not good. It's not a surprise that's the case. There's a lot of things here to improve. So when Tocchet talks about teaching the basics, and people might look at that and say that's appalling. These are NHL players. It does feel like with the Canucks, you've got to build it from the ground up. And if he's got the right plan, it could work. I don't know that it works this year. So their goals for 3.29 per game this past season, not bad. Their goals against 3.61, that's not great. But the defensive and goaltending sides of things really hurt this team throughout the season. And so this is a storyline they have to change this year if they're really and truly going to make the playoffs. And I'm not overly optimistic with playoffs. I was optimistic last season. I thought they had all the pieces necessary to make a run at the playoffs and get above the playoff line, and then everything just fell apart. So not predicting that again. Their power play 22.7% wasn't bad, but the penalty kill 71.6%. The problem is that all season they were tracking towards the worst penalty kill since the NHL started keeping that stat. 71.6% is actually better than where it was most of the season, which is pretty damning when you look at, just the fact that that's a miserably bad number. You add those two numbers together, you've got 94.3%. That's not good enough, right? So that penalty kill number has to be at least, I would say, 8 points better if they want to get close to a playoff spot. And that's not easy, although they've done their best with their moves in the offseason, and we'll talk about it to address that problem. So the last time this team made the playoffs was 2020. 2020 was also the first time they'd gotten out of the first round since 2011. And there was some optimism around the team, and then Stetcher left, and as far as I know, they didn't make him an offer, and Toffoli left. As far as I know, they didn't make him an offer. It was bewildering, and there were a lot of Canucks that were kind of confused by how things were approached after that 2020 run. And I think that led to a slow start to 2020, 2021. And watch for those starts. This is a team that needs to be like 7-2-1 after 10 games. Get above the playoff line. Get confidence. Because if they don't, we may be looking at another long season. Stanley Cup. It's Vancouver, so I'll just leave that out there. Cap space currently $765,833 according to Cap Friendly, with both Pearson and Pullman on the LTIR. There's been talk about whether or not Tanner Pearson might be able to play this year, that he's going to come to training camp and all this. But if he is able to play and he's cleared, this is a team that's over the cap. If he's not able to play, it gets them under the cap, sure, with Pullman, who's probably not playing again either. But yeah, it's not a great way to have to get under the cap. There's still talk about who might be traded and what moves might be made before opening night. So their top 5 scorers this past season, Pettersson didn't really have a rival on this team. Not when it came to MVP voting. Although Quinn Hughes might have got a few. But yeah, Pettersson, 80 games, 39 goals, 63 assists for 102 points. Finally arrives now that his wrist is healed up and was healthy for the first time in quite some time. JT Miller, for all of the negativity thrown at JT Miller, and I get it, because that first half of the season I was right there with everybody, but his defensive play definitely got better after Tocchet took over. And with Tocchet taking over, the question mark I had with that was, so if he's going to improve the team's record, why wouldn't you have made the move sooner from Boudreau to Tocchet so you have a better chance of making the playoffs? And again, the idea that you're so far out of the playoffs, you're not going to make it anyways. So adding on a bunch of wins at the end of the season just hurts your draft positioning. But it did help Miller. Miller, 81 games, 32 goals, 50 assists, 82 points. Being above a point per game, not too bad, considering, again, everybody will say he had a bad year. I'm not saying defensively he's going to make anybody forget Hischier or Suzuki or anybody who's a good two-way forward, but I don't think Miller's as bad defensively as he looked the first, I'll say, 45 games of the season. And there were some serious gaffes in there, right? Quinn Hughes, 78 games, 7 goals, 69 assists for 76 points. Hughes, I think that there's going to be a season at some point where he scores around 15 goals. He has the shot. I'm always surprised he doesn't get more goals than he does, but the points totals are there. I think he could hit the 90-point mark at some point in his career during a season. He's dynamic, and we've seen that right from the beginning, and it just feels like he gets better every year. Kuzmenko, I think, caught the league off guard a little bit. We'll see what his goal totals do this year. 81 games, 39 goals, 35 assists, 74 points. Quietly, a very excellent season for Kuzmenko and his first in the National Hockey League. And I say quietly because there's not a lot of hype around Kuzmenko. I think because he's older, so the odds of him, improving on his goal totals, probably not that great. Probably more likely he ends up closer to 30 than 40 this year. Again, I'm just saying because I figure the NHL is going to adjust at least a little bit. But he could prove me wrong too. Kuzmenko, I think, benefited too from getting some of that ice time after Horvat left. And some of those tip pucks that Horvat might have had early in the season, he was getting late in the season. And then there's Brock Besser. So there's all this debate about where Besser's going to go and when he's going to get traded. But 74 games played, 18 goals, 37 assists, 55 points. We have seen with Kuznetsov in Washington, who wanted out, that trading a contract that's expensive, that's got term, on a guy who's not producing the way you want him to, it's tough. And so with Besser, it's kind of been the same. That the 55 points are good, the 18 goals, that's the red flag for a player who looked like he was going to be a 30-goal scorer every year when he came into the league, and it just hasn't happened. He's had injury problems as well. He needs to stay healthy. The scoring needs to pick up, and then I think teams will start calling about his availability. At this point in time, Besser, I think, starts the season as a Canuck. He said he wants to stay in Vancouver. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. And here's to hoping that he has a bounce back this year. The goaltending, there was a misadventure with the goaltending in that Demko didn't play well. Then it turned out he was hurt. Played very well after returning from injury. Plays 32 games, a 14-14-4 record. 901 save percentage. So he did get the save percentage above 900. Spencer Martin had a miserable season. 29 games, a record of 11-15-1. The 871 save percentage, it's not great. And so I felt bad for Martin. I think he was overplayed. But I don't think Martin is going to be the backup to start the season. Although, with depth being as it is, he may very well end up being there by default, at least to start the season. Delia, 20 games played, 10-6-2 record, 892 save percentage. He, of course, exits as a free agent. We'll see if he lands anywhere else. Delia had an up and down year. The problem was it seemed to trend more towards the down as the year went along. And then there's Silovs. Silovs has got some excitement in Vancouver. 5 games, 3-2 record, 908 save percentage. Looks like he's legitimately going to be an option for the Canucks within the next year or two, or maybe this year. Maybe he gets that backup job, right? Until the Canucks either go out and get somebody else, or we hear something publicly like, it's Martin's job to lose. Silovs could very well end up being the guy, and then maybe Martin ends up being the guy in Abbotsford instead. So, the hits leader on this team, Dakota Joshua, 222 hits. I thought he played better as the season went along. Tyler Myers, blocked shots, your leader with 144. There's still a speculation about whether or not he's going to be a Canuck much longer. Posts, Elias Pettersson leads there with 11. So, not really a surprise. Yep, he definitely hit a lot of posts, I recall. For the next one, and the Canucks don't have as good of a prospect pool as a team should when they've made the playoffs once since 2015. But I went with Tom Willander, the first-round pick this year. Again, the Canucks have really kind of messed things up with the drafting and development. With the previous regime, we'll see whether or not that is really and truly fixed soon. Fantasy sleeper, I went with Höglander because Höglander spent a lot of the season in Abbotsford. He probably starts the season in Vancouver and should be well motivated to prove people wrong and to show the team what he can do. And with his work ethic, he may very well thrive under Rick Tocchet. So we'll see what happens with Höglander and if he plays. But to me, he's the sleeper. And an honorable mention of Podkolzin. I kind of feel like Podkolzin, maybe he's better suited to being in Abbotsford this year rather than playing for the Vancouver Canucks. MVP, I had to put Pettersson up. If this team's going to go anywhere, it's going to be through Elias Pettersson. You do wonder if the uncertainty regarding his contract could cause a distraction. I don't think it will, at least not early in the season, but if it drags out, it could lead to some distraction later in the season. The schedule's rough with them to start things out. They have their home debut, which is fine, I believe, against Edmonton. Okay? And then they have a 5-game road trip right after that. They go to Edmonton, and then Philly, Tampa Bay, Florida, and Nashville. So that's the East Coast swing that very often hurts the team. It starts in Edmonton, but then it goes to the East Coast, and we'll see how things go, especially the 2 games in Florida. If the Canucks get lit up by the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, which they have in the recent past, it may cause a panic in Canuck land very early in the season, which kind of ends up happening anyway. So again, I'm just waiting to see what the drama is going to be. There are a lot of things the drama could be, a lot of things you can guess, and what's more fun than guessing? Speaking of which, the channel vote guesses that the Canucks aren't going to be much better. 3% of the channel said first or second. Love the optimism. 15% said third or fourth. This is a tremendous drop from last season. Fifth or sixth, 54% of the channel say fifth or sixth. That would be considered a fail by the Vancouver Canucks management for what they're trying to put together here. 28% say seventh or eighth. I want to say it's not possible. I do. I want to say it. I really want to say it, but Vancouver, how many years have I had the channel now where things just go bad? Anyways, exits, of course, Ekman Larsson got bought out. They had to. That just wasn't going well, and it wasn't going to get easier. And definitely, I thought that was the smart move. Burrows leaves as a free agent. I wish him the best. Hard worker. Ethan Bear leaves as a free agent, and I get the feeling that if the Canucks can find a way to bring him back, they will. And I say that because he's still a free agent at this point. I think they like Ethan Bear. I think Bear liked playing in Vancouver. So if they're able to create more cap space and bring him back, one thing with Bear, there's no rush because he's dealing with an injury right now. So the odds of him signing somewhere else, probably not that great. But I don't necessarily think that his time in Vancouver is done. You have Dermott, you have Delia. Dermott I felt bad for. He was hurt most of his time as a Canuck, so you can't really grade things there. And again, Delia, better start during his run with Vancouver, fell off a bit towards the end. But his numbers are good enough, I think somebody gives him a look, even if it's just on a tryout. The additions, the much ballyhooed additions down the middle, beginning with Teddy Bluger. I like Bluger a lot. I have liked Bluger a lot for a while. He's brought in to fix the penalty kill. So's Pius Suter, who comes in from Detroit. Ian Cole's been added on the blue line. Carson Soucy added on the blue line as well. And Matt Irwin added for depth on the blue line with the idea that these guys are penalty killers. These guys will fix what's wrong with the penalty kill. I just don't know if these 5 guys mean, yeah, the Canucks are going to be a playoff team this year. That's where I have a hard time. And again, does their roster look good on paper? Sure. Their roster on the paper actually looks pretty good. But we've been through this before. So, again, we'll see how it goes this season. Podkolzin, I feel like, needs to get going. And whether that happens here in Abbotsford or whether it happens in Vancouver, I think that's something you need to get done. Get his confidence going, get him comfortable, and I think he'll be fine. There's definitely been flashes of that talent level that made him a top 10 draft pick. The penalty kill, as I mentioned, has to improve. The Canucks, if their penalty kill sucks this year and they're against really good power plays to start the season, Edmonton, Florida, Tampa, that's going to test the penalty kill. If their penalty kill has its struggles, again, that will take the panic meter and throw it right off the charts in Vancouver. And Tocchet's systems have to work. So Tocchet's talked a lot about his systems and what he's bringing in and all of the work he's doing on fundamentals. It has to work. We have to see better defensive play from guys on that blue line, and we have to see it basically translate to that better penalty kill, translate to lower goals against, without sacrificing the offense. One thing with Tocchet teams in Arizona, we did see offense became a bit of a problem with some of the defensive systems he had in place. Yeah, Arizona could keep the puck out of the net, but they needed to score. Mikheyev needs to be 100%, so Ilya Mikheyev should be back. He looked very good in Vancouver early on, and then he got hurt. And it's just the injuries with Vancouver. It's not like they had a lot of them, but it felt like they were key injuries because the Canucks didn't have the depth to replace the guys getting hurt. Who's the next captain? Who do you think? All right, I agree with you. No, all kidding aside, I would think it's going to be Pettersson, but it's probably going to rely on him signing a long-term extension. I would think you don't want to sign a guy you don't want to name a guy as your captain and then watch him leave within a season or two. So I mean, maybe it ends up being Quinn Hughes. Maybe it's JT Miller. JT Miller, sure, he's ornery and people don't like some of his attitude, but at least he's honest. At least he's honest, and when things suck, he'll tell you, yeah, things suck right now. I do wonder with the backup position, do they really and truly have a guy right now that will be the backup, or are we going to see somebody else come in? There are still a couple of free agent goalies out there. Yes, there's Halak. I don't think Yarrow Halak's going to come back to the Vancouver organization. I can't see that happening, but I do think that if Silovs and Martin, if those are your goalies down in the AHL, that's probably for the best, to be honest. Myers trade, there's been speculation about when that might happen. Of course, he has to get paid out his signing bonus, the signing bonus before the season starts. And then while he has a $6 million cap hit for this final season of his career, he's only paid $1 million in salary. So it's possible that makes him a more attractive trade option. But I don't know if anybody's going to pick him up. To be honest, I don't know, because a team isn't going to do that for Vancouver without demanding draft picks, prospects in return. The Canucks don't have a lot of really good prospects, and they should be very wary of trading a top two, like a first or second round draft pick. Drives me nuts how often this franchise has traded away second round draft picks in their existence. And then the other interesting thing is that while I've talked about the development and the problems the teams have with development, and I don't think Canuck fans are going to be arguing that the Canucks have the best development system, but the other Elias Pettersson has been quite good. And he's turned a lot of heads since being drafted. And he looks like he's going to be a bona fide NHL defenseman. So anytime I see Canuck fans suggesting trading him, and I've seen that on occasion, like, well, we could probably trade the other Pettersson. Please don't. Please stop it. This is a team that has traded away draft picks and prospects too early. And it's sort of Gustav Forsling, anybody? And so, yeah, I would like to see the Canucks actually hold on to guys and, hold on to those draft picks as well, because I'm not convinced this team is necessarily a playoff team this year. I do have my doubts. A lot of things have to go their way, and really Rick Tocchet's systems have to work. And that early road trip, they have to win, I will say, out of those 5 games, 3. If they go 2-2-1 on that road trip, people will probably be okay, but if they go like 2-3, and if they lost that home start, if they're 2-4 to start the season, coming home after a 5-game road trip, they're again, I do think the panic level in Vancouver will be high relatively early, because they're really selling this idea that they can get to the playoffs this year. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. 82% of the channel says they'll finish 5th or lower. I can't argue with that, because it's hard for me to argue. I'm not going to even try with Edmonton and Vegas. I can't with LA. And then you got Seattle. And then if Calgary, if they bounce back and they improve, well, that's 5 teams ahead in the Pacific. The numbers get dodgy pretty quick. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.